Welcome to the show.
While the rest of the corporate world is fast asleep, a multi-billion-dollar economy is just waking up. Think about it. It's 2:15 a.m. The spreadsheets are closed, the flights are grounded, and the downtown office towers are dark. But on 1,000 neon-lit corners across America, the drive-thru lanes are wrapped around the block. For decades, the post-midnight hours were a culinary afterthought, a wasteland of leftover fries and skeleton crews. Not anymore. Welcome back to From Kitchen to C-Suite, the podcast where we trace the journey of the food industry, from the frontline prep line to the executive boardroom. I'm your host, Don. Today we are diving deep into the midnight shift, America's late-night fast food boom. We are witnessing a massive structural shift in how and when America eats. Driven by a rising gig economy, unpredictable hybrid work schedules, and a generation of Gen Z consumers who view midnight as prime time, the hours between 10 p.m. and 4 a.m. have become the newest battleground for QSR dominance. The contemporary late-night hospitality and food service landscape is undergoing a profound structural transformation, primarily propelled by the convergence of the 24/7 gig economy, evolving Generation Z dining behaviors, and the ubiquity of night owl digital delivery platforms. As traditional operating hours give way to a round-the-clock labor market, consumer expectations have shifted toward constant accessibility, with younger demographics heavily favoring non-traditional mealtimes and spontaneous, digitally enabled dining experiences. This systemic shift in consumer behavior has introduced both lucrative opportunities and acute operational challenges for industry stakeholders, effectively forcing a macro-level reconfiguration of traditional restaurant business models. In response to these market drivers, the industry has experienced significant operational impacts, characterized by a mix of strategic revenue generation and complex logistical strain. On the revenue side, establishments are increasingly leveraging premium midnight pricing models to capitalize on inelastic late-night demand, while simultaneously utilizing ghost kitchens to optimize delivery efficiency, reduce brick-and-mortar overhead, and capture market share without expanding physical dining spaces. However, these commercial advantages are heavily counterbalanced by an escalating labor rescheduling crisis. Operators must navigate the logistical friction of staffing non-traditional shifts within an already volatile labor market, balancing increased overhead costs and worker burnout against the lucrative potential of the midnight economy. This isn't just about satisfying the late-night munchies anymore. This is a masterclass in supply chain optimization, dynamic surge pricing, and algorithmic labor management. Fast food giants and agile upstarts alike are rewriting their operational playbooks to capture a demographic that is hungry, digitally savvy, and willing to pay a premium for convenience in the dead of night. The brands winning tomorrow aren't the ones fighting for the 12 p.m. lunch rush. They are the ones capturing the 12 a.m. digital basket. Inside today's episode. In this episode, we unpack the mechanics behind this nocturnal gold rush. We'll explore the margin magic, why late-night orders yield some of the highest profit margins in the business, despite skyrocketing overnight labor costs. The AI drive-thru, how automated ordering systems and voice bots are solving the graveyard shift's biggest headache, the chronic labor shortage. The menu pivot, how culinary R&D teams are specifically engineering portable, high-fat, high-flavor items tailored exclusively for the midnight consumer. Joining us later in the episode is a retail strategist who helped pivot a major regional burger chain into a 24-hour powerhouse, netting a 35% increase in same-store sales without adding a single square foot of real estate. So grab a strong cup of coffee, adjust your headset, and let's look at the hard data behind the late-night hustle. The grill is hot, the headsets are on, and the C-suite is taking notes. Let's get into it. For a significant portion of the post-pandemic era, the traditional American practice of late-night fast food consumption was profoundly disrupted. The 24-hour operational model, historically an essential resource for shift laborers, students, and nighttime consumers, was largely dismantled due to a complex convergence of macroeconomic pressures. Specifically, an unprecedented triad of severe food commodity inflation, critical labor deficits, and escalating security risks forced corporate operators to curtail evening hours. Recently, however, the quick-service restaurant (QSR) sector across the United States has initiated a comprehensive normalization and expansion of late-night operations. Major corporate brands are aggressively extending operating hours to recapture a critical operational daypart that had been previously abandoned. This systematic revival represents a calculated strategic pivot by an industry seeking alternative avenues for revenue generation within a tightening economic landscape. The following analysis details the structural factors driving the revitalization of the late-night QSR market. Strategic capital optimization in post-inflationary markets. The strategic pivot toward reinstated extended operational hours is fundamentally driven by macroeconomic imperatives. Over the preceding multi-year fiscal cycles, Quick service restaurant (QSR) operators mitigated supply chain disruptions and escalating commodity inflation primarily through aggressive, compounding menu price increases to sustain top-line revenue growth. However, contemporary market metrics indicate that consumer price sensitivity has reached a critical inflection point. As inflationary pressures contract discretionary household income, transaction counts, and guest foot traffic during traditional peak dayparts, specifically lunch and dinner, have contracted substantially. Consequently, further price escalation has become commercially unviable, threatening to trigger diminishing marginal returns. To counteract decelerating daytime sales volume and preserve market share, corporate executive leadership is systematically targeting underutilized dayparts to capture latent demand. The late-night window, formally defined as the hours between 2200 and 4 o'clock, represents a highly lucrative, structurally underpenetrated market segment, characterized by resilient demand and diminished competitive density. By expanding operational velocity into these non-traditional hours, enterprises can optimize fixed cost amortization, maximize capacity utilization of existing brick-and-mortar infrastructure, and extract higher asset yields. This tactical optimization of the corporate footprint effectively drives incremental revenue growth without requiring dilutive capital expenditure for real estate acquisition or physical expansion. Stabilization and technological rationalization of the labor market. The onset of the COVID-19 pandemic induced an unprecedented macro-environmental shock, precipitating a severe labor contraction across the hospitality and service sectors that fundamentally disrupted traditional operating models. During the subsequent economic recovery phases, an acute scarcity of hourly labor rendered the staffing of overnight shifts operationally untenable. Franchise owners and corporate operators were forced into a defensive posture, struggling to maintain baseline headcounts even for core daytime periods. This systemic instability meant that non-traditional dayparts, such as the late-night window, were summarily abandoned as enterprises consolidated their constrained human capital to protect peak lunch and dinner revenues. In this highly volatile environment, the high turnover rates and severe staffing deficits characteristic of the service industry compounded operational friction, making the execution of a 24-hour operational cycle a logistical impossibility for the vast majority of quick-service restaurant (QSR) networks. Over the ensuing multi-year macroeconomic cycle, the labor market underwent a structural evolution, transitioning from acute post-pandemic volatility into a contemporary landscape characterized by stabilized labor supply and normalized employee retention metrics. This newfound stability has re-established the predictable staffing baselines requisite for corporate leaders and franchisees to strategically plan and consistently execute non-traditional operational shifts. However, this equilibrium was achieved concurrently with a permanent upward shift in compensation baselines, as legislative mandates, collective bargaining pressures, and cost of living adjustments established permanently elevated wage floors. These inflated variable cost structures altered the fundamental unit economics of the QSR business model, rendering legacy, labor-heavy operational frameworks financially unsustainable and compelling corporate executives to engineer leaner, highly optimized staffing models designed to preserve operating margins during lower volume, off-peak periods. To mitigate the margin compression imposed by these permanently elevated wage baselines, the QSR industry aggressively accelerated its capital investment in automation and digital transformation, systematically targeting customer-facing and administrative touchpoints. Front-of-house labor, which historically required a dedicated contingent of manual cashiers and point-of-sale operators, has been comprehensively replaced by a ubiquitous network of digital self-service kiosks, proprietary mobile applications, and centralized loyalty platforms. This technological shift successfully transfers order entry responsibilities to the consumer, drastically minimizing human capital requirements for front-counter order processing and permitting a solitary employee to supervise an entire dining footprint. Concurrently, order transcription within the drive-thru channel, historically the most labor-intensive and error-prone component of the QSR ecosystem, has rapidly transitioned from manual human order takers to sophisticated AI-driven voice recognition systems and conversational natural language processing (NLP) algorithms. By automating the drive-thru order capture phase, enterprise brands can maximize order throughput, eliminate communication latency, and enhance order accuracy with near-zero incremental labor costs, thereby converting extended operational hours into a financially viable and highly scalable enterprise strategy. Through the strategic deployment of these integrated automated solutions, an individual QSR unit can execute late-night transactions utilizing a highly compressed, operationally optimized skeleton crew, thereby restoring the fiscal viability of the overnight shift even within jurisdictions with hyperinflated labor costs. Under legacy operating models, quick-service infrastructures were structurally tethered to high labor headcount requirements to simultaneously manage concurrent operational vectors: order capture, payment processing, manual order transcription, and food preparation. When applied to non-peak or nocturnal dayparts, this rigid, labor-dependent paradigm invariably yielded negative operating leverage and non-viable overnight margins, as the fixed and variable labor costs heavily eclipsed the lower density of overnight transaction revenues. This structural financial bottleneck has been comprehensively dismantled by these systemic technological interventions, which serve as the critical macroeconomic inflection point redefining modern restaurant economics. By shifting from legacy, human capital-dependent frameworks to an automated, AI-driven operational model, underpinned by self-service architecture and digital transaction engines, brands have successfully decoupled top-line transaction volume from variable human labor metrics. Consequently, this automated framework compresses restaurant operations down to minimal labor requirements, isolating and focusing human capital strictly on physical food preparation, culinary fulfillment, and kitchen throughput, rather than administrative task management. By radically depressing the operational break-even threshold and minimizing variable labor friction, this structural realignment unlocks sustainable, high-margin late-night profitability, converting what was historically a cost-prohibitive, operationally fraught daypart into a highly efficient, high-yield revenue stream capable of maximizing fixed asset amortization across a 24-hour fiscal cycle. Alignment with evolving demographic and workforce trends. Over the past 5 years, the structural composition of the domestic workforce has undergone a fundamental transformation, driven primarily by the rapid expansion of the gig economy. This vast, decentralized network of rideshare operators, independent couriers, and contract laborers has established a substantial and permanent consumer base that operates entirely outside the conventional 9-to-5 framework. Simultaneously, sustained structural growth across the logistics, e-commerce, warehousing, and healthcare sectors has placed millions of essential shift workers on transit networks during non-traditional hours. Because these critical labor segments require accessible, high-quality, hot food options during hours when full-service dining establishments are typically closed, quick-service restaurant (QSR) brands have been forced to reevaluate their operational strategies. Consequently, major industry players now recognize that the nocturnal market is no longer merely a transient demographic of university students and late-night entertainment seekers, but rather a permanent, socio-economically vital, and highly lucrative component of the modern labor force that demands dedicated, 24-hour infrastructure. The digital evolution of late-night food service. The operational mechanics governing late-night food consumption have undergone a profound paradigm shift, transitioning from traditional, physically constrained consumer transit to highly sophisticated digital fulfillment ecosystems. Historically, late-night restaurant operations were tethered to the physical presence of patrons, which introduced significant overhead, security risks, and unpredictable foot traffic. However, the integration and maturation of third-party logistics, 3P networks, such as DoorDash, Uber Eats, and Grubhub, have fundamentally re-engineered the unit economics of nocturnal dining. By leveraging these digital intermediaries, quick-service restaurants, QSRs, and fast casual operators can effectively decouple their revenue generation from physical storefront limitations, radically enhancing the profitability metrics of extended-hour operations. The implementation of extended operational hours serves as a primary catalyst for capturing high-margin, third-party logistics, 3P digital volume, initiating a highly profitable operational cycle. When food service establishments remain accessible during non-traditional hours via digital marketplaces, they unlock a specialized segment of consumer demand characterized by distinct purchasing behaviors. First, these late-night digital consumers exhibit significantly lower price sensitivity, prioritizing convenience and availability over cost, which allows operators to maintain robust margins. Second, this day part yields an elevated average order value, AOV, as orders frequently consist of large group requests or multi-item purchases from co-located shift workers or nocturnal consumers. Finally, the digital interface enables optimized off-premise bundling, allowing restaurants to strategically pair core menu items with high-margin sides, beverages, and desserts. Together, these three compounding economic factors transform extended hours from a mere operational expansion into a highly efficient vehicle for maximizing digital revenue. During off-peak early morning hours, digital marketplaces experience a disproportionate surge in high-margin order volumes that follow a highly favorable economic profile. Consumers utilizing delivery applications during these non-traditional windows display distinct purchasing behaviors. Suppressed price elasticity. Off-peak digital consumers exhibit a lower sensitivity to premium pricing, delivery fees, and service surcharges, prioritizing convenience and speed over cost. Elevated average order value, AOV. Late-night orders frequently manifest as high-value group orders or multi-item bundles, driven by co-located shift workers, families, or late-night cohorts. Optimized off-premise bundling. Digital menus allow operators to dynamically promote high-margin sides, beverages, and desserts, maximizing the profitability of each transaction. For restaurant operators, a sophisticated digital delivery infrastructure yields a critical structural advantage. It facilitates the capture of these high-margin revenue streams while allowing the physical front-of-house dining areas to remain entirely closed. This hybrid operational model mitigates the security liabilities, labor costs, and utility overhead typically associated with late-night retail, transforming the graveyard shift into a highly optimized, capital-efficient digital fulfillment window. Risk mitigation and modern security architectures. From a historical perspective, the proliferation of 24-hour commercial operations in metropolitan corridors was severely constrained by escalating security liabilities and a statistically pronounced surge in nocturnal altercations. These volatile conditions served as a primary deterrent for franchisees, who remained understandably reluctant to expose their frontline personnel to the unique vulnerabilities inherent to late-night shifts. Consequently, the financial viability of extended operating hours was routinely compromised by the overriding necessity of risk mitigation and employee safety concerns. In contrast, the contemporary resurgence of overnight commerce is directly facilitated by the strategic implementation of sophisticated, defensive operational designs that fundamentally alter the late-night retail environment. Modern corporate chains are increasingly adopting decentralized dark kitchen protocols or transitioning exclusively to off-premise, drive-thru only service models past 2300. This structural shift is reinforced by a comprehensive suite of specialized physical and technological security enhancements, most notably, physical isolation barriers, the integration of reinforced, ballistic-grade drive-thru transaction windows designed to establish a definitive physical separation between staff and the public, rapid response integrations, the deployment of advanced, integrated panic button systems configured for instantaneous communication with local law enforcement agencies, proactive surveillance, the utilization of AI-monitored closed-circuit television (CCTV) networks, engineered to algorithmically detect anomalous behavioral patterns and potential threats before they escalate into active security breaches. By systematically isolating the workforce behind these defensive perimeters, while simultaneously preserving seamless, friction-free transactional capabilities, corporate enterprises have successfully re-engineered the late-night operational framework. This holistic approach has effectively lowered the institutional risk profile to a threshold that reassures stakeholders, thereby justifying widespread franchise participation and unlocking previously inaccessible nocturnal revenue streams. The strategic outlook. The contemporary quick-service restaurant QSR sector is experiencing a strategic pivot, characterized by aggressive competition for late-night market share. Industry leaders are increasingly leveraging sophisticated, data-driven marketing campaigns, exclusive nocturnal digital promotions, and menus specifically engineered to capture late-night consumer demand. This operational shift represents a profound transformation for a daypart that was historically avoided due to labor inefficiencies and security concerns. Today, what was once viewed as a liability has been systematically repositioned as a primary battleground for market dominance. For consumers, the resurgence of extended drive-thru and delivery windows provides essential convenience, while for QSR operators, this daypart has emerged as an indispensable, multi-billion-dollar catalyst for incremental revenue and sustained fiscal growth. As the overnight operational window draws to a close and early morning commerce begins, it becomes indisputably clear that the late-night fast food boom in the United States represents far more than a temporary market anomaly. Rather, this phenomenon signals a permanent, structural realignment of societal habits, economic cycles, and consumer behavior. The period traditionally designated as the graveyard shift, once dismissed as a low-volume, marginal operational window, has rapidly evolved into a high-stakes, lucrative frontier for contemporary quick-service restaurant empires. Dominance during these nocturnal hours has become a primary battlefield for market share and brand loyalty. This shift is driven by a fundamental restructuring of the consumer ecosystem. The conventional, standardized corporate schedule no longer dictates the parameters of the modern economy. Instead, a diverse and growing demographic consisting of gig economy logistics providers, healthcare professionals, shift workers, and nocturnal demographic cohorts now demands premium, freshly prepared food options in the early hours of the morning. This behavioral evolution requires a comprehensive reimagining of traditional operational frameworks. Capitalizing on this midnight surge demands exceptional competency in logistics, characterized by the deployment of predictive artificial intelligence to optimize drive-thru velocity, and the strategic curation of condensed, high-margin menus designed to balance rapid execution with strict cost mitigation. Crucial to sustaining this momentum is the management of the human element within the overnight supply chain. Operating a brick-and-mortar location during these hours introduces complex challenges regarding employee safety, competitive compensation structures, and talent retention. The enterprises that ultimately capture the late-night market will be those that prioritize robust investments in the security, corporate wellness, and financial equity of their overnight personnel. For corporate leadership within the executive suite, This operational landscape provides vital strategic insights. It demonstrates that true commercial innovation is not born solely within corporate test kitchens or isolated boardroom environments. Rather, it is forged out of logistical necessity on the kitchen floor under intense operational pressures. Long-term corporate excellence requires organizations to identify these macroeconomic shifts early, adjust supply chains seamlessly, and maintain the cultural and organizational agility necessary to engage consumers precisely where they are. Every late-night transaction serves as a micro-demonstration of supply chain resilience, labor optimization, and large-scale corporate adaptation executing in real time. We express our sincere gratitude to our audience for engaging with this analytical exploration on this episode of From Kitchen to C-Suite. To ensure you remain informed on the critical economic and culinary trends reshaping the global boardroom, we invite you to subscribe to the program, leave a professional review, and distribute these insights to your colleagues across preferred networks. This program is made possible through the generous commitment and sponsorship of HRB Universal, whose dedication to providing comprehensive professional resources and promoting operational excellence remains vital to empowering leaders across the culinary and hospitality sectors. We additionally acknowledge the pivotal role of the Plate and Pour Collective Equity Partner Program, an initiative that exemplifies a dedication to fostering shared success, equitable growth, and inclusive entrepreneurship within the food and beverage industry. The upward trajectory to executive leadership requires innovation, relentless dedication, and access to an elite network. Accordingly, we encourage our audience to utilize the strategic resources provided by our sponsors by visiting hrbuni.com. To maintain engagement with our corporate insights, you can access the From Kitchen to C-Suite podcast across multiple multimedia platforms. For audio distribution on the go, listeners can subscribe through Riverside at fromkitchentocsuite.riverside.com, visit hrbuni.com, or access the program via major syndication networks, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon Music, Audible, iHeartRadio, and Deezer. For an enhanced, high-definition visual experience, the program is available for streaming on the HRB TV network, accessible on television applications by searching for HRB TV Network on Roku or Fire TV platforms. We look forward to your presence during our next broadcast as we continue to analyze the pivotal business developments designed to elevate your professional trajectory and entrepreneurial drive. Until our next session, continue to innovate, adapt strategic vision, and maintain an uncompromising commitment to superior institutional achievement.